Yep, tonight we're talking sand, specifically the kind of sand that's become a very important ingredient in hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, the drilling method that's unlocked all these incredible oil and gas-rich shale plays all across the country. In the fracking process, you use huge amounts of water to blast open cracks in the rock underground, which unlocks previously hard-to-reach oil. But in order to pump out that oil, you need a substance that will keep those cracks open. You know what's perfect for it? Sand. Yep. But I decided to open things with Mr. Sandman because roughly 3 weeks ago, Ollie Slorer, a smart energy analyst at Morgan Stanley, came out with a piece declaring a multi-year sand super cycle with demand outpacing supply to the point where we get a serious sand shortage in a couple of years. And sadly, I think the super cycle prediction could turn out to be nothing more than a dream. It's true that sand is much cheaper than the alternative ceramics, and because we're doing so much fracking in this country, there's a huge demand for this stuff, which is why the sand stocks like Emerge Energy Services, U.S. Silica, and High Crush Partners have been rocketing higher for the past couple of years. And believe me, it's not this kind of sand. It's got higher qualities to it. Anyway, given that this group has already had such a huge run, and considering that the price of oil has been slammed lately, as I talked about at the top of the show, I think it's very risky to start talking about a bullish super cycle in the sand space, which is why tonight I want to go over the sand stocks and tell you why I think you should avoid most of them. It's all fun and games in the sandbox until someone gets hurt. Before I get into the nitty-gritty, though, let me explain why I find this super cycle call to be so worrisome. It's not... I find every super cycle call to be worrisome, to tell you the truth. The thing is, you hardly ever see a big run after some analyst calls a super cycle. Instead, we tend to get short bursts, which is exactly what happened when Slory pronounced a sand super cycle. And then the stocks in the group, of course, then proceeded to roll over. We've seen it with the coal super cycle. We've seen it with the ethanol super cycle, and I bet the exact same thing happens here. Plus, let's not forget that when Morgan Stanley came out and said oil service titan Schlumberger was headed right to 118, that marked a short-term topple in Schlumberger, too. How about the individual players in the fracking sand space? I have to tell you, the only one of these stocks that I ever think of owning at this point is one I've actually been behind, which is Emerge Energy Services, EMES, but I've been getting cold sand feet of late. Now, Emerge is a master limited partnership that's protected by a bountiful distribution that's expected to come in at roughly $7 a share over the next year. That equates right now to a 5.8% yield at these levels. In the last 3 weeks, Emerge has come down an astonishing 24 points. It was up in a straight line, though. It's still up 170% year to date. The company mines, processes, and distributes plain old silica sand. In particular, they're the leading producer of northern white silica. And I know that sand is not like fine wine, but this is the premier no sand before its time sand. Now, aside from the yield, Emerge Energy Services is my favorite player in the group because it's been most aggressive about adding new capacity. In order to grow the business, you have to keep open sand mines. Thanks in part to the increase in production, the company's expected to nearly double that distributable cash flow per share next year. That's that 5.8% yield. That's going to allow Emerge to increase its distribution. So it should have an even higher yield, unfortunately, especially as the stock goes lower, like it did today when it declined 4.3%. And that's the thing. Even if the sand stocks keep rolling over like they did today, I don't see Emerge going that much lower than where it is right now because of that yield support, although I'm not exactly enthusiastic about even this one. And I've got to tell you, I have seen yield support erode for every single commodity in the last few weeks that it would take your breath away. Still, if you absolutely have to play in the sandbox, the boom in hydraulic fracturing, Emerge Energy Services is the one to own it. Let me put it this way.
Okay. I think we should probably go tropical with this thing, like sand from wall to wall. I know a great sand guy we can get at a price.
Emerge is your sand guy. But as for the others, I would simply avoid them. High Crush Partners, HCLP, integrated producer, transporter, distributor of monocrystalline sand for use in hydraulic fracturing. It sports a 3.9% yield. High Crush is up 56% for 2014, rallied 122% over the last 12 months. Super cycle, we've been having one. Well, I think this company's been well managed. The fact is that the run-up has made the stock fully valued. For High Crush to keep rallying, we need to see continued exceptional growth in demand for fracking sand. In other words, if the sand super cycle doesn't play out as expected, High Crush could be in trouble, especially since it generates the majority of its revenues from just 5 customers. Let me put it this way. The analysts covering the stock have 7 buys, a few holds, 0 sells, which means the slightest hiccup, and you're going to get a slight hiccup if oil takes out $90 a share, believe me, will cause High Crush to get, well, Crushed. What about U.S. Silica? SLCA, the largest domestic producer of silica sand, both for the oil business and for other industries like gravel mining. Here's a stock that's up 161% over the last 12 months, another jaw-dropping amount. Now, U.S. Silica does have the highest quality sand reserves in the country, and they have access to the major railroad arteries needed to transport the stuff. This is all by rail, this stuff. But my problem is not with the company. It's with the stock. I think it's overheated. Just like High Crush, the analysts covering U.S. Silica, 9 buys, 2 holds, no sells. Hey, super cycle, here we come. They're so bullish that any problems could cause a dramatic sell-off. The problem you see with the sand super cycle thesis is that at the end of the day, you know what it is? It's still sand. Now, the stuff is a commodity. It's a commodity business. And if sand ever gets too expensive, then oil drillers can simply switch to another material. Hey, just look at what happened to Carbo Ceramic, CRR, which makes ceramic propellants for hydraulic fracturing, a stock that we haven't liked. Carbo's product is superior to sand, but it's much more expensive. Carbo had been on a real tear, but lately it's been losing customers left and right, and in just the last 3 months, the stock has lost 55% of its value when a couple of customers said, you know what, we're leaving ceramics, we're going to sand. I think Carbo keeps going lower, even after today's hideous 16% decline. Believe me, that is not... don't take that as a sale you want to participate in. But the real takeaway here is that if Carbo Ceramics can be eviscerated in a matter of months because the product got too expensive, I fear the same thing could easily happen to its competitors in the sand space if their product becomes too expensive. Emerge, High Crush, and U.S. Silica may have the best sand for fracking. But if it gets too pricey, I don't see why the oil companies won't switch to something else, a lower quality sand, a cheaper sand, or maybe another material altogether. I am not backing away from my belief in the North American oil and gas renaissance. Said that at the top of the show, but here's the bottom line. I think the sand stocks are just too darn high, especially considering the sudden decline in oil. If you want to play the demand for frac sand, you know what I think? Let's get a little safety involved here. Safety first. Safety never takes a vacation. Union Pacific. That's what I would do. They ship the stuff. And if, despite my warnings, if you really believe in the sand supercycle, then the only stock in the group that has my blessing is Emerge Energy Services. We've had them on twice. I like the cut of their jib, or is that jibe? Jib is the camera. Anyway, because it's protected by a juicy yield. The stock has run so much, so you simply have to expect a consolidation to occur. Oh, and consolidation, that's code for, ouch, I'm getting pounded by sand!